What's happening, everyone? My name is Adrian, and welcome back to What the Pun. Hope you're all doing good and doing well. And on What the Pun today, let's start off by addressing what this is doing here. So usually there should be a Mark 6 Golf R, my Mark 6 Golf R in this spot, and for some reason this green Volkswagen ID3 Pro Life version is in the spot. So in regards to specs of this car, I will have it up on the screen round about here and now. So what's happening? Basically, my Golf is having some work carried out on it, so in the meantime I won't have a car to use. So I decided it would be a good idea to rent a Volkswagen ID3 and see what the fuss is all about, because basically quite some time ago I did a number of videos on the ID3 because it seemed like quite an exciting electric car that was being launched at the time, and now I have an opportunity to rent one out and see what the fuss is all about. So let's start off by having a look around the car, shall we? Alright, so you now join me inside the Volkswagen ID3. And how long have I had it now? So over a week. I've had the car for over a week, and I have mainly been using it for my everyday commute to and from work. The journey roughly looks about 8 miles each way. Journey time can be between 50 minutes to an hour and a half. And I've done the odd motorway journey to visit friends, but otherwise, that was the main purpose of me taking this car, whilst my Golf is having some work done. So whilst we're in the ID3, how about I start off with what I have liked about the car. So the good bits about the ID3. So as I mentioned already, I've mainly been using this car as a everyday commuter, and having a week's experience driving this car to and from work, I can understand why there's more and more of these popping up on the road. There's loads of them. There's loads of ID3s on the road, and now I get it, because it's a solid everyday car. Visibility is really good. You got really good large windows, driving positions decent. You have good visibility of everything on the road. It's a very easy car to drive. At first I wasn't too sure about this kind of video game gear changing twisty thing, but it makes sense. There isn't much of an adjustment period to get used to it, because it just, like I said, it just makes sense. It's just, there's little adjustment period to get used to it, because it's basically one gear. The transition of the speed, how it builds up, is just so smooth. So overall, the driving comfort is nice. Car is very spacious. It is a little bit longer than a Golf, a little bit wider than a Golf. It's very simplistic inside. Charging ports, 2 at the front, 2 at the back. So you got kids, got friends sat at the back. Well, and so you basically got charging ports for them, keep them busy, hopefully. But yeah, as a everyday car, I honestly can't really fault this too much. It's done really well for me. Going to and from work does the job. In terms of charging the car as well, I think based on the type of mileage I do, it hasn't been much of an issue or range anxiety, as you would say. I have charged it at home about 2 times, a short little top up, and then once I left, one time I've left it overnight. I was on about 100-mile range. I left it overnight, and it was fully charged by the time I got back to the car to use it in the morning. I have been using, so I was given 2 charging options. I got the normal charging cable, and then the other one being the at-home sort of 3 pins charger, which is the slowest in the world, but it's done the trick basically. And that's based on the type of miles and journey I've been doing for the week. And yeah, it's not really experienced much range anxiety. I have set up a account with Shell Recharge in case I needed to use a much faster charging station to top up the car, but I've not had to use that just yet. But yeah, I think that covers everything I like about the car, to be fair. So moving on next, whilst I'm still inside the car, another thing I want to go over is basically about the driving modes. So in addition to the typical driving modes we're all used to seeing in a car, this in addition also has a mode labeled B. What does that mean? Well, in Volkswagen's ID3 manual, B basically represents their high brake energy recuperation mode. What does that do? What does that mean? Does the car drive normally? Well, yes, the car still drives normally in B modes. The main difference you'll see is when you're letting your foot off the throttle. So what happens? So as you're letting your foot off, the car would basically automatically apply brake to bring your car to a gradual stop. And it basically uses this energy to recharge a battery for you. So does that mean it doesn't do it in D? Well, it does, but it's just that you're manually braking and the car's using that energy to charge the car. And according to the manual, whilst you're in D and also eco mode, it's a bit more efficient as well. So it's kind of like a semi B mode. So why would you use B over D? Well, it's actually, B is in the manual, it's recommended to use especially if you're going downhill, because then it's just using that automatic brake energy more efficiently as you're going downhill, as opposed to you just letting it roll downhill, if you know what I mean. But driving daily is actually quite cool using the MB, because then the only thing I'm doing is just every so often assisting the car with me on the brake pedal to just make sure I'm not hitting the car ahead. So I'm just keeping a safe distance ahead of the car ahead, and I'm stopping at the lights. But otherwise, I'm not doing much else in the car apart from steering and making the car go forward, letting go so the car automatically brakes. But otherwise, yeah, it's just making my driving experience, either very lazy or very simple. Depends how you want to see it. But yeah, in terms of the energy it regenerates, you may, I feel like, see a very minuscule difference between D and B. But otherwise, yeah, I think that's what I wanted to cover. Now, how about some of the things I dislike about the Volkswagen ID3? And let's just start off with the tech. The car does come as standard with a whole load of tech to basically protect you from potential hazards on the road. But the problem is, I feel like some of the tech is just trying to be a bit too smart. For example, something I'll probably do every single day is, reverse into space. And because of someone of my height, sometimes I may need to basically adjust my driving position so that I have a better view maybe. So for example, let's say I put it into reverse right now, And I might need to get a little bit better visibility, so I might actually need to leverage myself a little bit higher off the seat just to have a better look, or basically change the angles of which I'm looking at. So for example, now if I was to leave the seat like so, oh, the car's cut off, I can't reverse. So back into the seat, car thinks I'm back here again. So let's try that again. Reverse, but off, part. So I find that just a little bit annoying because of someone of my height. I would this, even though it's not something I'll be doing all the time, sometimes I may need to just kind of wiggle off my seat a bit just so I can change the angles at which I'm seeing or get a better view. But the car thinks it knows better and thinks it needs to turn its, well, cut off basically. And on the topic of reverse parking, so this ID3 just about squeezes into my garage space. It's a bit longer than the Golf, so I have to go a little bit tighter at the back. And the problem with that is, if there's a feature on here, if you don't turn it off, the car's basically going to... So, let me explain. As you're reversing, because of the parking sensors, it thinks you're too close to whatever it is at the back, so then it's just going to cut off every single time. And there's a feature on here called auto hold. If you turn that off, then it will allow you to basically override it, so you can go as far back as you can without the car stopping every single time. So yeah, that's another feature in terms of the tech that I find annoying, but luckily I can turn that off. The bottom detection, that is not a feature to turn off. Next up, the sort of, well, my personal complaint, well, not really a complaint, it's just something I've noticed based on the journeys I've done, is the comfort of the car. So in terms of like my daily commutes, it's been okay, it's not bad, but what I tend to find is after I've been sat in this car for a bit too long, it's a bit uncomfortable, and sadly there's not much adjustments you can do to the seats. Basically, ride height, front and back, and the leaning position. There's not even like a lumbar adjustment on this, so I think it's just that the padding here, it's a bit tough or a bit too firm, and I find that after I've been in the car for a bit too long, it just gets a bit uncomfortable for my back. That might just be personal to me, but I just, yeah, that's what I've noticed. Otherwise, yeah, given that this is a 70 plate, still a relatively new car, the car's only done 20,000 miles, yeah, it's not really survived the test of time very well. I think it's just mainly because of the cheap plasticky materials. Even the exterior trim hasn't lasted very well, but then again, that could just be that this is a rental car, so that yeah, it's been tested by people that don't really care about looking after the car. Next up, let me tell you about this entertainment system, this touchscreen system. Let me grab the camera and we'll go through it together. Okay, how about I tell you a bit about this? So, what I do like about this is that it's a very large screen. Basically, yeah, having Apple CarPlay on this screen is a game changer. I'm not sure I can actually go back to a smaller screen now that I've been using CarPlay on this massive screen. But yeah, putting that to one side, this itself is not a very user-friendly system. So, for example, okay, it starts up in this menu here, right? So let's say, for example, I want to change the ambient light settings of the car. You would assume you go to vehicle from here, go to interior options and interior lighting. Oh, okay, maybe it's not here. Just so it turns out, because if you're not very tech savvy and you're not familiar with this kind of stuff, you wouldn't actually think that this square actually does anything. So if you press the square, brings you here. You can swipe across. There's settings. Maybe it's in here. Oh no, that's something else. That doesn't take me to adjust the ambient light settings of the car. So okay, let's press this again. Okay, so what happens if I press the dots with the many dots option? Aha! Okay, so we have these options. So would you say there will be vehicle settings or background settings? Let's have a look at background, because that's a light bulb. Ah, okay. So it will be background settings. So yeah, not very intuitive, but it's because I roughly know where it is that I actually can navigate to these settings. But otherwise, not very obvious. And if we go back again, vehicle, well, that takes you back here. But for some reason, you'd have to go through this very silly menu option to take you back into these options. In terms of any driver assist options, you have this here, and you have this funny screen, but which is about lane assist and steering wheel vibration, which I am going to tell you about something in a bit. But yeah, this system I think needs a bit of work, can be a bit more simplified. I mean, I do understand why they have all these menus and options, maybe because you don't really have any other buttons here, but yeah, I'm not a fan of it. It can be a bit more simpler and easy to use because not everyone is very tech savvy, if you know what I mean. Another thing I don't quite get along with in this car, or I don't quite like in this car, is the lane assist feature. I find that in the ID3 and the Peugeot that I had before is very similar. So what I mean is, like, the lane assist feature in the car, I find it a little bit too aggressive. So for example, if you was trying to maneuver around a cyclist and it feels like because the car thinks it knows better, then it tries to maneuver you back in between the lanes. And I find the way it reacts to maneuver you back in between the lanes is a bit too aggressive and surprising. So then, because I'm trying to correct what the car was trying to do to avoid the cyclist, it's, on a few occasions I feel like I was a little bit shocked by how aggressive the car has tried to put me back in between the lanes. So, which I also found was also this very similar case with the electric Peugeot I had before as well. But yeah, I think that covers everything in terms of what I don't quite get along with the ID3. But a few things I'd like to highlight anyways. I wouldn't say they're dislikes, they're just things I feel like you need to know, if you get what I mean. So, modes. You do get different modes in the ID3, which is Eco, Comfort, Sport. Sorry, I had to think about that one. And Individual. Let's just talk about Eco, Comfort, and Sports. So, in terms of how I feel like the car drives and responds between all three of these modes, you're going to notice a very minimal difference, to be honest, especially when you're jumping between comfort and sports. It's not a huge night and day difference, to be honest. It's only a very slight difference in throttle response in sports, a little bit more aggressive. Steering might be a little bit more tighter. And in terms of the braking, it feels a bit more aggressive. So I think I feel like as soon as you let off the throttle, the harshness of the braking that kicks in is turned up a little. So I think that's how maybe it's programmed to make it feel a bit more sportier. But I honestly don't feel like there's any sort of benefit in having sports mode in the car, to be honest. A car like this, I don't feel anyone that will buy a ID3 would be someone that's fussed about having sports mode, to be honest. It's not the, I would say, sportiest of electric cars. But yeah, because it's honestly such a good daily commuter. I don't feel like the option of having sports mode is necessary, to be honest. That's my personal opinion, honestly. But the other thing I wanted to point out or highlight what was it? The other thing I wanted to highlight is how this car performs on the motorway. So this has been great. This has been a solid everyday car for me for my daily commute. But I feel like in terms of motorway performance with electric cars, this is where it's not performing so great. And I felt that the same with the Peugeot as well. Because once you get one of these electric cars, driving consistently at 70 or maybe a bit more, that is where you'd notice the range of the battery depleting much quicker. So, you might be getting, well, your screen might tell you it's 170, but once you're consistently doing 70 or 80 miles, or maybe more, I don't know what you want to drive it at, but once you're consistently at least 70 plus, consistently, then you're not going to get the advertised range, I feel like. It might be to the age of the battery, but I've noticed it with the Peugeot E208 as well. So for me, as a daily commuter for work, because I don't do motorway miles, it's been perfectly fine. I like it as a daily commuter for what I'm using it for right now. But if you're someone that needs to do a lot of motorway miles every single day, and you're driving constantly at least at 70 or plus, then you might need to reconsider maybe not an electric car, maybe an electric car with a much bigger range might be more suitable for some the range that I'm getting with this. If I'm doing I imagine if I'm doing constant motorway miles every single day, I'll probably have to stop and charge it a lot more just to be on the safe side. But yeah, that's my personal opinion. And that, I believe, I've covered everything I want to talk about in regards to the ID3. And overall, what do I think? So I think I've said a few times that this is, for what I've been using it for, a very solid everyday car. I mean, I can't fault it. It's been very good to and from work for me every day. In terms of the range, I think it's good enough for what the journeys I'm doing. But where I see issues is if you're someone that needs to do a lot of motorway miles, then that's, for me, I feel like the range that this car offers may not be sufficient, because then I can only imagine you'll be stopping a lot more often. And I still feel the charging network in the UK is not quite good enough, especially if you're doing a very typical weekend or bank holiday UK road trip. For example, if I decide this weekend I want to go to South Wales, I will probably have a lot of range anxiety during this trip and worrying about if there's a charging station that's going to have working charging points, and how busy those charging points are, and also just hanging around all that time just waiting for the car to charge up so that I can continue with my journey. But yeah, that's the only flaw or issue I see with having an electric car with this type of range. So I think if you're considering an electric car, it's really, you need to consider what type of journeys you'll be using the car mainly for. And like I said, many times already, if like me, you're doing a very similar kind of daily work commutes like I do, I feel like this car is very good for it. It might be a bit boring because honestly at the moment I still feel like an electric car is not for me. I'm still very much a petrol head, and I find this car quite boring. Otherwise, if I just need an everyday work commuting car, I think this would be fine. I would prefer if it had leather seats and not be in this green, but that's more of a personal problem for myself. But yeah, anyways, I hope you all found today's ID3 content helpful and useful. In regards to next week, I hopefully should have a very exciting update for you in regards to my Golf R. And for me, that will be all this week. So if you don't want to miss out on what's going on, and if you're enjoying the channel, please make sure to subscribe and like. And from me, that will be all. I will see you all next time. Thank you very much for tuning in. Take care and bye bye.